When he stepped back, his eyes wide with fear, I knew that something much greater than myself had arrived in that place. His lips trembled, and he pointed at me as if he were facing a power that no money or influence could control. "He knows your name. He knows where we are," he said, almost whispering. I was standing before a man who believed he had absolute control over everything and everyone, a man who saw women as mere objects. But in that instant, I realized I had witnessed something he could never explain or command. It was the first time I had pronounced the name of Jesus with true faith, and that cry came from my soul, piercing every fear and doubt I carried. My name is Amira Hassan. I am 24 years old, and what I am about to share is not a story of pity, but of hope. I grew up in Cairo, in a modest neighborhood, where the dust of the streets contrasted with the gold of the mosques that reminded us daily of my family's faith. My father, Ahmed, served as an altar boy for wealthy families, and my mother, Fatima, earned a living sewing traditional dresses. We were not rich in possessions, but we were rich in faith. From a young age, I learned to pray, to fast during Ramadan, and to wear my hijab with pride. The mosque was our second home, and the Quran, my constant guide. On Fridays, while my father lost himself in sermons and we women settled into the women's section of the mosque, I dreamed of a simple life, dedicated to family and devotion. But beauty, which for many was a gift, became my burden. From the age of 15, I heard comments that reminded me of my worth, but also of my vulnerability. With that face, Amira could marry someone important, they would say. My mother, even worried, could see in my eyes that I also harbored these thoughts. At 20, while helping my mother with her sewing, our lives changed irreversibly. My father arrived home with a strange, almost feverish gleam in his eyes. "I have news that will change our destiny," he said, and I felt a mixture of expectation and fear. In the preceding months, I had worked as a driver for the Al-Rashid family, one of the most influential dynasties with direct ties to the Saudi royal family. Unbeknownst to me, Prince Khalid bin Faisal al-Rashid had seen my photograph, a simple photo my father kept in his wallet and had casually shown him. 2 weeks later, a family representative arrived at our home with lavish gifts and a formal proposal. Prince Khalid, a respected religious leader and government advisor, wished to make me his wife. The dowry offered promised to completely transform our lives. My brother would study at the best universities, my father would have a permanent position, and my mother would never have to work herself to exhaustion again. But none of that could measure the true challenge that awaited me, navigating a world where wealth and power seemed to control everything, except the strength that Christ would place in my life. "It is the will of Allah," my father said that night, tears streaming down his weathered face. "He has seen our faith and is rewarding us." My mother, normally cautious, also seemed convinced. A prince, Amira, a man devoted to faith and service to his people. What more could we wish for? But inside me, a silent unease grew. There was something about the haste with which everything had happened, the way decisions about my future had been made, without me truly knowing the man I was going to marry. Small signs triggered alarms I couldn't name. Still, refusing seemed impossible. It would be disobedient, proud, selfish. Besides, I kept repeating to myself, this was the honorable path, marrying a devout man, a life dedicated to faith. My meetings with Prince Khalid before the wedding were few and far between, brief, formal, and supervised. He was impressive, with the authority inherited from generations of privilege. He spoke eloquently about faith, responsibility, and the value of preserving traditions. "You will be very happy," he told me at our second meeting, but there was something in his eyes that I couldn't understand, a coldness that contrasted with the gentleness of his words. The wedding was a lavish affair, held in one of Cairo's most luxurious hotels. Hundreds of guests, mostly strangers, celebrated our union. My family gleamed in new clothes, bearing the dignity that accompanies social recognition. I sat on my ornate throne, smiling beneath flawless makeup, and dressed in an outfit more expensive than anything we've ever owned. But inside, my heart pounded with an unsettling premonition. After the ceremonies, we boarded a private jet bound for Riyadh. Khalid remained polite but distant, occupied with his laptop and discreet phone calls. "Rest," he told me when I tried to start a conversation. "Tomorrow your new life begins, and you'll need energy." We landed at dawn. A line of black vehicles with tinted windows awaited us, and we drove through Riyadh under the golden sun that illuminated skyscrapers and mosque domes. Finally, the wrought iron gates of an immense estate opened. The palace was a modern fortress disguised as a luxurious residence. High walls, cameras on every corner, and security guards who looked more like soldiers than employees. The architecture combined Arab tradition and contemporary minimalism. White marble, ornamental fountains, and impeccable gardens. Beautiful, but like a gilded cage. "Welcome home," Khalid said, leading me through the lobby. The marble floor reflected crystal chandeliers that looked like frozen tears. An aroma of expensive incense mixed with a sterile, almost hospital-like smell filled the air. A woman approached, her face covered, leaving only her eyes visible. "This is Noura," Khalid introduced, and in that instant I knew my life had changed forever. "She will oversee your transition and teach you the rules of this house." Transition. Rules. The words echoed in my mind, laden with a weight I still couldn't comprehend. "It's a process. Rest today," Khalid continued, heading toward another wing of the palace. "Tomorrow you will learn your responsibilities." And so, without ceremony, without the traditional wedding night, without explanations, I was left in Noura's care. My room was magnificent, opulent to the extreme. A bed with a silk canopy, a marble bathroom with a built-in bathtub, a walk-in closet that seemed to house my entire former life in clothes I never chose. But I noticed something immediately. The windows had decorative grilles that, while beautiful, were not merely ornamental. The elegant door had a lock that could only be opened from the outside. "The rules are simple," Noura said, with the monotony of someone who had been repeating them for years. "You don't leave your area without permission. You don't make calls without supervision. You don't question the prince's decisions. You obey any order immediately." My confusion must have been obvious, because she added with a tired look that almost seemed like pity, "It's like that for all the wives." "All the wives?" I asked, feeling a chill tighten in my stomach. "The prince has 4 legitimate wives, as the law allows, and several temporary ones. You will meet some of them soon." That night, lying in that strange bed, in that palace that looked more like a gilded prison, I prayed fervently. "Allah," I whispered in the darkness, "give me patience. Give me understanding. There must be a purpose. There must be wisdom in the path the Lord has laid out for us." But my words seemed to ricochet off the marble walls, never reaching the sky. In the following days, I realized the harsh reality of my situation. I could only move around certain areas, always accompanied, always watched. I met 2 other wives of Khalid, Layla, a young Syrian woman who had been there for 2 years, and Yasmin, a Moroccan woman whose empty gaze deeply disturbed me. "Don't ask too many questions," Layla warned me, in one of the rare moments of conversation in the inner garden. "Don't try to understand. Just obey and survive." The resignation in her voice was more frightening than any threat. Khalid would appear occasionally, always polite but distant, with a cold courtesy that I initially mistook for respect. I soon understood that I wasn't a wife in the traditional sense. I was more of a possession, a piece in a collection. "Your beauty makes you valuable," he said one evening during dinner in a private room. "But your disobedience makes you useless. Useful. Never forget that." A week after my arrival, I heard sounds that shouldn't exist in a respectable palace. Muffled screams, sobs rising through the ventilation ducts in the early hours of the morning. I asked Noura, hoping for an explanation. She replied with a harshness that left me dizzy. Rule I forgot to mention: never ask about sounds. Never. But curiosity, perhaps the survival instinct, made me observe and listen. I learned to piece together the fragments. Guards coming and going at strange hours, vehicles with tinted windows arriving in the early morning, and a horrible truth hidden behind the gold and marble. One afternoon, from the 2nd floor, I saw something that will never leave my memory. A group of young women were being hurriedly led from a vehicle to a side entrance of the palace. Their heads covered, their hands discreetly tied in front. They were not walking as guests. They were walking as prisoners. The image was etched into my mind with the cruel clarity of something that many prefer to ignore. During my 3rd week in the palace, I was taken to a place I still call hell. Khalid ordered me to accompany him to the so-called charity area. "You will participate in our humanitarian work," Noura explained, in a dry tone that allowed no argument. "We help women in difficult situations. We give them shelter. We descended a service staircase that led to the palace cellars. With each step, the air grew thicker, permeated with that antiseptic smell I had noticed since arriving. We reached a corridor lit by fluorescent lights. So cold and impersonal, it seemed like another building altogether. Metal doors lined the sides, each with a small window reinforced with thick glass. Khalid stopped before one of them. "These women come from terrible situations," he said, as a guard unlocked the door. "Abuse, poverty, wars." When the door opened, all illusion of charity crumbled. A windowless room, 6 mattresses on the floor, 5 women watching us with empty eyes I had already seen in Yasmin and in some of the palace maids. An 18-year-old girl had marks on her wrists. Another, with Filipino features, recoiled, trembling. My heart tightened. Khalid, impassive, commented, "These are the lucky ones. Soon they will be placed in homes where they will serve with honor." The door closed, and we continued down the corridor. More doors, more rooms, muffled sobs, pleading voices in languages I didn't know. "The world is full of lost women," Khalid said, walking beside me. "We give them purpose, structure." My mind struggled to comprehend. This wasn't charity. This was, and the word hit me like a punch, human trafficking. I had unknowingly married someone who orchestrated it. I tried to keep a neutral face, but Khalid studied me, his eyes cold and calculating, like those of a predator. "I understand that it may be shocking at first," he said, his voice surprisingly soft, almost paternal. "In time, you will understand the importance of this work. Your role will be to assist those who speak Arabic, teaching them how to behave before they speak." At that moment, I realized that my life had become something much bigger and darker than I could ever have imagined. And for the first time, my faith, the faith I had carried since childhood, began to become the only light in the darkness of that golden palace. The room began to spin around me. I can't," I stammered, feeling the ground disappear beneath my feet. But before I could finish the sentence, Khalid raised his hand, cutting off my words with icy authority. "You can do it, and you will succeed," he said, with a firmness that sent shivers down my spine. "You are my wife now. What is mine, including this operation, also belongs to you. To refuse is to refuse me, and you know that is unacceptable." He didn't even need to finish. I understood perfectly. That night, locked once again inside my luxurious prison, I knelt on the prayer rug, but the words simply wouldn't come. The pleas that had always flowed from my lips since childhood remained stuck in my throat. "Allah," I whispered, almost voicelessly, "how can this be your will? How can someone who claims to preach your word be involved in something so wicked?" The silence that answered me was so profound it felt like a scream. For the first time in my life, I felt my prayers hit the ceiling and fall back down on me, without echo, without meaning. The following weeks were a constant torment. I was forced to participate in what Khalid called cultural conditioning. I was there when new women arrived, terrified, hungry, deceived. I translated instructions, helped Noura with the integration process, as they called it. Each day was a deeper descent into an abyss I had never imagined. I met Aisha, an Egyptian like myself, lured by false promises of work in Dubai, and Mariam, a Sudanese woman sold by her own family to traffickers who tossed her from country to country like merchandise. There was also Zainab, a Syrian woman who fled the war only to fall into the hands of those who turned her desperation into profit. "Why don't you do anything?" Aisha once asked, her pleading eyes locked on mine. "You're his wife. You have power." But I didn't have that. I was a prisoner too. My cell was bigger. My chains were made of silk, but they were still chains. When, trying to gather courage, I timidly mentioned to Khalid that this didn't seem right, his mask slipped. The frozen courtesy gave way to his true face, pure cruelty. "You seem to need to better understand your position," he said, with a calmness that sent chills down my spine. "I was locked up for 3 days. No food, just water. Reflect on obedience." That was all he said before closing the door. Inside, time lost its shape. The walls seemed to close in. My mind began to break. I compulsively recited verses from the Quran, those I had memorized since childhood. But something inside me was changing. It was as if a crack had opened in the foundation of the faith that had sustained my entire life. If Allah permitted such things, if a respected religious leader could commit atrocities in his name, then what was true? What was holy? What was deception? When I was finally freed, they gave me no rest. They took me straight to the dungeons. Today you will learn your final lesson in obedience, Khalid said. I was forced to watch the brutal training of a woman who had tried to resist. I can't fully describe what I saw. Some things are too dark even to repeat. But that night, something inside me broke. And at the same time, something grew stronger. I knew I couldn't escape. I tried to imagine it 1,000 times. High walls, guards, cameras, my passport confiscated, my family in Egypt believing in a fairy tale. It was impossible. But I decided that if my body was trapped, my mind wouldn't be. I stopped mechanically reciting the prayers I always did. They sounded empty now, heavy with hypocrisy. Instead, I began to whisper sincere, raw, desperate pleas, words that came from the depths of my wounded soul, without rituals, without formulas. And it was in that emptiness, in that silence where nothing made sense, that something began to change. I began to say a prayer that I never imagined I would ever utter. If there is a true God, if there is real justice in this universe, then show me. Because what I've been taught can't be everything. It can't be the whole truth. 2 months after my arrival at the palace, my words, without my knowledge, began to be answered, but not in the way I imagined. Khalid appeared one morning with a face filled with disapproval. You will be temporarily transferred to our central facility, he announced, as if delivering a sentence. Your passive resistance has been noted. Perhaps you need to see the entire operation to understand its importance, and how small your role is in it. I was blindfolded, put in a vehicle, and driven around for about an hour. When they removed the blindfold, we were in an industrial district on the outskirts of Riyadh. Gray warehouses, empty streets, a place where nobody pays attention. The warehouse where they took me was the very heart of darkness. If the palace basement was hell, this was the epicenter of the fire. About 50 women of various nationalities were there. That was the sorting center, where they were separated, trained, and prepared for clandestine auctions, destined for buyers from various Gulf countries. You'll stay here for 2 weeks, explained a man named Rashid, scars marking his face like a map of violence. Here you'll learn obedience from the perspective of merchandise. Perhaps that way you'll appreciate your privileged position as the prince's wife. They took away my luxurious clothes and gave me a simple tunic, almost a captive's uniform. I was placed in a space where 30 women shared a place designed for 10. Thin mattresses, cold floors, dirty bathrooms, insufficient food. The lights never went out. But what devastated me most wasn't their physical condition. It was their eyes. The eyes of the older women, the ones that had been there for months. Eyes without sparkle, without life, as if their bodies had remained, but their souls had already departed. Layla, a Jordanian woman who had been there for 8 months, explained the structure of that place to me in a low, bitter voice. The supervisors are ex-prisoners who sold other women to gain privileges. The trainers are experts at breaking the human mind. The guards are cruel for the simple pleasure of being so. She talked about the techniques used, sensory deprivation, collective punishments to create fear among the women themselves, small rewards to generate dependence. Prince Khalid owns all of this, Layla whispered one night as we huddled on the thin mattresses. But he uses his religious and political position to protect himself. No one dares touch him. He is untouchable. During those days, I saw things that no heart should ever have to endure. I saw a young Ethiopian girl, perhaps 17 years old, plead for freedom until her voice gave out. I saw a Russian woman being beaten simply for looking up. I witnessed the exact moment when the spirit of a Pakistani woman broke, as if her gaze went from pleading to completely empty in a single breath. And every night, lying on that mattress that seemed to absorb the despair of all those who had passed through there, I wondered, is this all that's left of my life? Is this the story they wrote for me? I didn't know it, but there, at rock bottom, God was already preparing the moment when he would finally speak to me. Back then, I believed I only had 2 possible fates, to die or to go insane, whichever came first. And it was precisely in that place of horrors that I tried to pray again, but not to Allah. I couldn't anymore. The words that once guided me now felt like ashes in my mouth. Instead, I began to murmur pleas to no one in particular. If anyone is listening, if there is a real God, a just God, I need to see. I need to believe that the world is not just this. Sometimes other women would watch me as I murmured in the dark. One night, while we were trying to sleep on that cold floor, a Filipina woman named Rosa approached. She was Catholic, and her eyes, despite the suffering, held a different kind of stillness. "Who are you praying to?" she asked, in a voice so gentle it almost made me cry. "I don't know," I replied with painful honesty. "I don't know who else to pray to." Rosa held my hand, her slender, trembling fingers intertwining with mine. "I pray to Jesus," she confessed with simple honesty. "My family has always been Christian. I was forced to hide my faith when I arrived here, but deep down, it's still his name I call upon." "And does he answer?" I asked bitterly, because nothing there seemed to be an answer from God. She smiled, a sad smile, but one filled with something I couldn't name. "The answer isn't always immediate escape," she said. "Sometimes it's just enough strength to survive until the miracle arrives." At that moment, I didn't know what to do with those words, but they remained there, planted deep in my soul like a seed that doesn't yet understand that one day it will become a tree. On the 10th day in that warehouse, we were informed that there would be a special presentation. A group of important buyers would be arriving that evening. We spent hours being prepared. Chemical baths, painful waxing, heavy makeup that attempted to hide the terror in our eyes. They dressed us in almost transparent silk robes, clothes that concealed nothing, because in that place we were not people, we were merchandise. "Eyes down, short answers, no tears," Rashid repeated as they lined us up. "Pleasing the visitors, perhaps they'll have a better life. Displeasing them." He didn't need to finish. We all understood. The showroom smelled of expensive incense, mixed with the sweat of fear. When the buyers entered, I felt my stomach churn. They were men accustomed to owning everything, assessing us like one inspects horses in a stable. The leader was an elderly sheikh, his face weathered by the desert sun, and his eyes having witnessed so much evil that nothing could shake them anymore. His assistants took notes on tablets as he walked slowly, observing each woman as if searching for flaws in a luxury item. When she came before me, she stayed longer than she stayed with the others. "This one is different," he commented. "There's education in her eyes." "What's the story?" Rashid consulted the tablet. "Prince Khalid's wife," he said. "Here for corrective training. She can be sold if the prince authorizes it." The sheikh nodded, intrigued. Then he said with automatic authority, "Open your mouth." There was something in his tone, something so dehumanizing, so cold, that it awakened a raw instinct within me. It wasn't courage, it wasn't strategy, it was the breaking of everything I had been swallowing for months. I opened my mouth, not to obey, but to scream, and the name that came out, I didn't expect it either. "Jesus!" It wasn't a sigh, it wasn't a plea, it was a roar, a sound that came from somewhere much deeper than my throat, as if my spirit had exploded from the inside out. The name echoed through the warehouse walls, as if it had a life of its own, vibrating, piercing the air, breaking the stifling silence of that place. It was there, with that cry, that everything began to change. And then it happened. At first, it was just a slight vibration, almost as if the air had held its breath, but soon the tremor grew, shaking everything around. The glasses on the tables began to clink against each other like out-of-tune bells. The chandeliers swayed as if they were about to collapse. The floor trembled beneath our feet, with a force that increased with each passing second. The lights flickered, and suddenly everything plunged into darkness. For a few seconds, there was no sound other than our accelerated breathing. Then a strange light appeared, a cold brightness, which didn't come from any lamp. It was as if it had simply sprung from thin air, and it illuminated everything, with an almost impossible clarity, making each shadow seem even deeper, each face more naked, as if we had been exposed from the inside. The sheikh stumbled backward, clutching his chest. The man who minutes before had seemed unshakable, now trembled like a frightened child. One of his assistants suddenly began bleeding from the nose. Another fell to his knees, trembling, murmuring incoherent words. "Iblis!" the sheikh shouted. "She's possessed!" The word echoed through the room, and immediately, everything turned to panic. Guards rushed in, unsure if they were facing an earthquake, a rebellion, or a spiritual attack. The enslaved women huddled in corners, some crying, others praying, each one calling upon the God she knew. But I stayed there, standing, in the midst of the chaos, feeling a peace that made no sense. It was as if something invisible enveloped me, as if a greater force were saying, "Stay strong." Some guards tried to grab me. I saw their hands approaching, and then simply slipping away from my body, as if they couldn't touch me. That terrified them. Even Rashid, always so self-assured, recoiled, his eyes wide. "Hold her!" he shouted, but his voice trembled. "Bring enough men if necessary." They ended up overpowering me through sheer numbers, not their own strength. As they dragged me away, I looked at the sheikh one last time. The fear on his face was so profound it seemed otherworldly. "He knows your name," he murmured, "just as he knows mine. He knows where we are." Those words stuck with me as if they had been tattooed on my spirit. I was led through the corridors and locked in a tiny room, a concrete cube with no windows, no bed, nothing, just the smell of mold and a sliver of light filtering through from under the metal door. 3 days without food, I heard Rashid order from outside. "Let's see if her god appears to feed her." The door slammed shut so hard that the sound echoed inside me. In the first few hours, I could only remember the tremor, the light, the desperate reaction of those men who thought themselves gods. It had been real, too real to ignore. But was it because of my scream? Or an accident? A sudden earthquake? An improbable coincidence? On the second day, thirst became my enemy. My throat burned. My mouth felt full of sand. My thoughts came in jumbled waves. I saw small points of light in the darkness. I thought it was a hallucination. Deprivation, despair, my body giving way. But the lights didn't go out. Blinking didn't erase them. Shaking my head didn't move them away. On the contrary, they began to move, to take shape, as if they had a will of their own. And there, in that utter suffering, in the depths of my darkness, something was about to happen. Something that would change everything in my life. That same bluish light I had seen in the presentation room, the one that seemed to have a life of its own, was there with me, as if it had followed me into the cell. It pulsed slowly, as if breathing, spreading a soft light in that suffocating darkness. And as my eyes adjusted, I realized it was concentrated near one of the walls. "If you're real," I murmured, my voice rasping, almost inaudible. "If it's not just my mind breaking, then show me the way out." The answer came in a silent way, but as clear as a scream. The light grew brighter. Then, it began to move, tracing a path to the wall opposite the door. I gathered the rest of my strength, which was already almost nothing, and began to crawl towards the point where the light shone brightest. When I touched the concrete, I felt something that made me hold my breath. It wasn't firm. It gave way under my hand, as if it had been recently patched up. I started scratching with my fingernails, not caring when they began to break and bleed. The concrete crumbled into small fragments, revealing what appeared to be an old pipe, hastily sealed during some renovation. I wasn't sure if it was real or if I was hallucinating, but something inside me, something that didn't come from me, said, "It's this way." I worked until my arms trembled. When I finally opened up enough space to see across, I found an abandoned service corridor, lit by emergency lights that flickered as if they were on the verge of dying. That's when I heard footsteps approaching my cell. There was no time to think. Either I tried, or I would die in there. With a force that seemed greater than my own strength, I widened the opening and squeezed myself through the hole. The concrete tore my skin. My shoulders were trapped for a moment, but I forced, pushed, until I slid to the other side. I fell in the hallway with a dry thud. I lay motionless, holding my breath, waiting for screams, alarms, anything. Nothing. That part of the building was dead, dusty, forgotten. The bluish light, I don't know how to explain it, seemed to guide me forward. Maybe it was real. Maybe it was God using my broken imagination to guide me. I only know that I followed. The corridor snaked like a labyrinth, filled with old pipes and rusty machines that creaked in the wind filtered through the ducts. At the end, I found an engine room, and there, hidden behind a huge boiler, was an emergency exit. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. The door had an alarm system. I already expected it to be impossible to open, but when I looked closer, I saw the wires hanging, disconnected, as if someone had removed the spare battery. A coincidence? No, that had gone beyond the realm of coincidence. I pushed the door open slowly, expecting it to creak, but she opened it without making a single sound. Outside, the desert night seemed like a breath of God. The cold air hit my face and almost made me cry. I found myself in an alley, surrounded by identical warehouses, with no sign of human movement. In the distance, the city lights twinkled as if calling to me, but I knew my limitations. Barefoot, wearing a torn tunic stained with blood, with a weak body, a burning throat, and no water, without knowing the way, without speaking the local dialect, and even with half of those men looking for me, I didn't stand a chance. None at all. That's when the impossible happened again. A white van turned the corner slowly, entering the alley where I was. Low beams, tinted windows, slow gear, and heading straight for me. There was no way to run. There was nowhere for me to hide. My heart raced. For a moment I thought, it's the end. But another thought came soon after, one that didn't seem to be mine. Do not be afraid. And there, trembling, dehydrated, lost in the middle of the desert, I waited to see what God would do next. The vehicle stopped right in front of the emergency exit I had just escaped through. It was a white van, with a logo that looked official, although I later discovered it was fake. The driver's window rolled down, revealing the face of a middle-aged man with Latin American features. "Come in, quickly," he ordered, speaking in Spanish with a heavy accent. "We don't have much time." My voice barely came out, a hoarse whisper. "Who are you?" "The person who was ordered to be here," he replied, opening the passenger door. "Don't ask any more questions until we're far away." There was no alternative. I got into the van, and he accelerated immediately, as if he knew every curve and shortcut of those back roads. We drove in silence for almost an hour, weaving through traffic and potential checkpoints, until he finally spoke. "My name is Roberto Mendoza." He explained that he worked as an independent service provider for several Latin American embassies in the Emirates. I was returning from delivering documents when something inexplicable happened. A clear, firm voice told me exactly where to go, at the exact time. I hesitated. I thought I was going crazy. And then there you were. The air inside the van felt heavy with meaning. None of us dared to speak further, but there was a silent certainty. This was no coincidence. Roberto took me to a small apartment on the outskirts of Sharjah, where a Filipina woman named Maria was waiting for us. She didn't ask anything, just led me to a bathroom, helping me drink water and eat slowly so as not to overexert my exhausted body. A Pakistani doctor arrived discreetly to tend to my wounds, bandaging my fingers and shoulders. "You were lucky, or something else," he said, almost in a whisper. I remained hidden in that apartment for the next 3 days. During that time, Roberto and Maria took care of everything. Emergency documents obtained through contacts at the Egyptian consulate, detailed instructions on how to stay safe, information about the risks I didn't yet understand. Human trafficking networks had spies everywhere, even inside some embassies. My photo could be circulating in airports, hotels, among guards, everywhere. But there was an ally, a person they trusted completely. Captain Amira Al-Mansour, from the Dubai Police's Transnational Crime Unit. When she arrived, she was dressed in plain civilian clothes, discreet, without any insignia or uniforms that would draw attention. But her presence conveyed authority and determination. She was living proof that, even in the midst of the worst, God still places angels in the lives of those who believe. The woman who entered the apartment was about 40 years old. Her face was firm, but not hardened, the kind of expression only someone who has faced the worst of human wickedness can carry without losing courage. Her eyes held something powerful, as if they saw right through you, but not with judgment, with purpose. He sat down in front of me, opened a tablet, and began recording everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. For hours he asked questions I never would have imagined. The exact location of the palace, how many steps there were on the staircase leading to the cellars, the smell, the procedures, the names, codes, routines, voices, physical features. Nothing escaped his notice. When I finished my account, Captain Amira let out a heavy sigh, as if confirming an old fear. "What you described matches information we've been trying to gather for 2 years, she said, maintaining her composure but with tension evident in her voice. "Prince Khalid is under observation, but touching him is practically impossible. He is protected politically, religiously, and financially. We need something that no one can challenge." That's when I remembered the codes. During my weeks in the warehouse, I observed them repeatedly. Letters and numbers that, at first glance, seemed random, but they weren't. I explained to her. The initial letters indicated the nationality. The following numbers represent the approximate age. Next came category, status, and even base price. When I finished speaking, the captain's eyes lit up, that kind of sparkle that appears when a key piece finally falls into place. "With this, we can track the flow of victims, and perhaps even identify frequent buyers," she murmured, already quickly jotting everything down. I passed on to her everything my memory could retrieve: complete codes, approximate dates, supervisors' names, architectural details. I even drew a rough floor plan of the industrial warehouse where I had been held on a napkin. She photographed everything. 4 days after my escape, the Dubai authorities, in partnership with Interpol, mounted a full-scale operation. The expectation was to find evidence, rescue survivors, and dismantle at least one arm of the network. But when they got there, the warehouse was completely empty. No furniture, no equipment, no boxes, no recent signs of use, as if someone had erased every trace during the early morning hours. The initial impression was that there had been an information leak, which wouldn't be surprising, considering the reach of those networks. But then the experts analyzed the building's security system. All the recordings had been professionally erased, all but one. The night I screamed, it remained intact. It was as if someone, or something, had prevented that file from being destroyed. The recording showed the presentation room exactly as I remembered it. It showed the moment the sheikh approached. It showed the instant I opened my mouth to scream. And then he showed everything. The lamps were swaying violently. The tables were shaking. Objects rising a few centimeters off the ground. Pieces of the ceiling are falling off. Cracks forming in the walls in real time. It wasn't symbolic. It wasn't metaphorical. It was there, recorded in HD. But the strangest things were yet to come. When they isolated the audio of my scream, the experts concluded that the recorded sound wave did not correspond to any human voice. It was impossible. The chief technician, a man with 2 decades of forensic experience, told Captain Amira, "I've never seen anything like it. The voice seems to have been amplified, but not by equipment, by some other source, something that doesn't show up on camera, but that clearly affected the physical environment." And one more detail that left everyone speechless. That night, the seismographs in Riyadh registered absolutely no seismic activity. 0. But the video showed a real tremor, localized, targeted. It was as if all that power had happened only inside that room, and in the exact second that I shouted the name of Jesus. My medical exam confirmed what my body had been screaming for months. I had marks of violence, signs of extreme hunger, severe dehydration, and injuries that, according to any specialist, should have left me unable to stand. But, to everyone's surprise, including my own, I recovered far too quickly. The neurologist was the first to raise an eyebrow, visibly intrigued. "This doesn't make sense," he said, crossing his arms. "Given the level of trauma, you should be having trouble even speaking. But your body is reacting as if it's received some kind of boost." He hesitated before continuing. "There is no medical explanation for this." That's when I realized that all of this was bigger than my story. My escape, the strange phenomena, the force I myself didn't understand. Everything was connected, and the authorities soon realized this too. My testimony, the physical evidence, the codes I memorized in the basements, every detail began to fit together like pieces of a puzzle that, until then, no one had been able to solve. The investigations expanded beyond what any agent had imagined. In a matter of 3 months, coordinated operations managed to rescue 17 women scattered across different points of Prince Khalid's network. Among them were Aisha and Mariam, the same ones I had embraced on nights of utter despair. When Amira showed me their photo, alive, even though thin and frightened, I broke down. It was the first time I had cried since my escape, but what she showed me next took my breath away in a different way. On her tablet was the thermal recording of the corridor where I had crawled on the night of the escape. The image clearly showed my silhouette, but I wasn't alone. A bright shape, which no technician could define, followed me closely. It moved with me, like a living shield, always at the same distance, always surrounding me. "They say it's an equipment malfunction," Amira explained, with the typical skepticism of someone who has seen a lot of strange things in her career. "But look, 15 years working with this, and I've never seen a malfunction move so precisely." She let the video play from beginning to end. That light appeared the exact moment I left the cell, and disappeared when I got into Roberto's van, like a guard who fulfilled his mission. Days later, when I finally managed to speak with Aisha, she confirmed that something supernatural had happened. Her first sentence sent shivers down my spine. "After that night, no one ever referred to you by name anymore. Inside, you became the protected one." She said that Rashid forbade any mention of me. The guards were terrified. They said I attracted things they couldn't control. And according to her, in the days following my escape, the warehouse turned into a silent chaos. lights flickering on their own, noises emanating from empty corridors. 2 guards dropped everything and resigned that same day, without explanation. And then, something that had never happened before. Prince Khalid appeared in person. Aisha recounted that he paced nervously, asking Rashid what exactly had happened. Rashid tried to explain. The tremor, the lights, the scream, my disappearance. The prince's expression changed. He turned pale, but not with anger, out of fear. He ordered the warehouse to be evacuated immediately. He said the place was spiritually contaminated, and there, at that exact moment, I realized that even the oppressors had found something greater than themselves, something they couldn't control, something, or somebody, who had never been on their side. 3 weeks after my escape, I was finally allowed to return to Egypt under a witness protection program. Before saying goodbye, Captain Amira gave me a small gift, a dove-shaped pendant. She told me, in a soft voice, that my grandmother, a Coptic Christian, used to say that when God intervenes in human life, we invent rational explanations to avoid confronting the inexplicable. She smiled slightly and continued, doors that should be locked but aren't, alarms that should go off but fail, rescuers who appear at exactly the right time, in the right place. Everything seemed like coincidence, but coincidences that defy all human logic. Amira paused, her gaze steady. I'm a police officer, trained to follow leads, evidence, rational explanations, she said, but I'm also human. And believe me, I've seen things in this world that no procedural manual can explain. Arriving in Cairo was like waking from a nightmare and discovering that real life had its own challenges. My mother and brother were waiting for me in a reserved room at the airport, notified only a few hours before my arrival for security reasons. My mother's embrace was my true return to life. Her tears washed away months of horror. Her familiar scent banished the ghosts. I knew you would come back, she whispered. Every night I felt you were alive, that you would return to us. But when I tried to recount what I had experienced, to describe the true face of Prince Khalid and his network of terror, I saw the expressions on my family's faces change. First relief, then confusion, and finally, denial. My father wasn't there to greet me. When we arrived home, I understood why. In the living room, 2 men I recognized from photographs. Representatives of the Al-Rashid family were waiting. Amira, my father said, his voice choked with emotion. These gentlemen are worried. They say you fled the palace and made terrible accusations against your husband. Prince Khalid is willing to forgive you if you return and retract these slanders. The room erupted in turmoil. My own family, my father, who should have protected me, seemed to be considering turning me in. On the way back, I managed to stammer, "Father, you don't know what that man does. You don't know what I saw." One of the representatives replied in a low but firm voice, "Your wife is confused, Mr. Hassan. She had an episode of nervousness, common in young women leaving home for the first time. The prince only wants her to receive proper care in Saudi Arabia." It was my mother who finally spoke. Her voice was trembling but full of firmness. "I need to speak with my daughter alone." When the men left, she approached and held my hands. "Tell me everything," she ordered, her eyes pleading for honesty. "Don't leave anything out," I replied, and then I began. Everything. The palace prison, the cellars, the warehouse, the women in captivity, the night of the scream, the escape, every brutal detail I had been hiding. When I finished, tears streamed down her face. "My daughter," she whispered. "My poor daughter." But then her expression changed. Fear gave way to a determination I had never seen before, firm, unwavering. "Your father received a lot of money from that family," my mother said, her voice low but firm. "Money that we've already used for the new house. And according to my brother's studies, they have power over us now. So you're going to send me back?" I asked, feeling panic rise in my throat. "I'd rather go to hell than allow that," my mother replied, her voice filled with a ferocity that surprised me. "But we'll have to leave tonight." While my father argued with the representatives in the living room, my mother quickly gathered the essentials. My brother, still not understanding everything but trusting his mother, helped us. We left through the back door while the argument continued inside the house. A cousin of my mother's took us to a bus station, and from there we caught a ride to Alexandria. There we took refuge in the house of a distant aunt who didn't ask any questions. In the following weeks, we lived in a terrifying limbo. My father was searching for us, and representatives of the Al-Rashid family hired private investigators, but my mother had cut all ties and burned all bridges. It was during this period of hiding that something inside me began to change. One night, unable to sleep, I went out onto the small balcony of my aunt's apartment. The Mediterranean air carried the salty smell of the sea, and the starry sky seemed to open up before me. I whispered a prayer that had been forming in my heart for weeks. Jesus, if you are real, if you are the one who pulled me out of that hell, I want to know you. There was no thunder, no lights, just a peace so deep and tangible that it seemed to envelop my body like a warm blanket. It was the first time since my escape that I was able to sleep without nightmares. In the following months, recovery was slow and complex. The Witness Protection Program gave me access to specialized therapy. Dr. Khalil, my therapist, had extensive experience with survivors of human trafficking. Recovery isn't linear, she explained patiently, while teaching me techniques to stay present when memories threatened to drag me back to the terror. There would be good days and bad nights, moments when it felt like I had regressed. Both were part of the journey. Post-traumatic stress disorder manifested in unexpected ways. Hypersensitivity to certain smells that instantly transported me back to the warehouse. Panic in enclosed spaces. Violent startles at any unexpected touch. EMDR therapy helped me process these traumatic memories without being consumed by them. Slowly, painfully, I learned to reconnect with my body, a body that had been treated as a commodity, as property. My family faced its own challenges. Mom had lost her husband, who refused to accept our choice, and my brother struggled with the opportunities that Al-Rashid's money had promised, but never materialized. But the deepest struggle was my spiritual transformation. I decided to follow Jesus, a decision that, in our culture and family, meant not only religious change, but cultural betrayal. The aunt who took us in was shocked by my conversion. The man who sheltered us ended up asking us to leave as soon as he discovered my faith. But none of that erased the certainty that had sprouted within me on that balcony in Alexandria. Something greater had rescued me, something that had accompanied me even in the darkest moments. I cannot shelter an apostate, said the man who was hosting us, and there was genuine sadness in his eyes as he said it. The community was already murmuring about my conversion, and he feared the consequences. So, once again, we had to leave. That's when we found refuge in a place we never imagined. A small Coptic church, in a humble neighborhood of Alexandria. Pastor Marcos and his wife, Miriam, welcomed us without questions and without fear. They offered us not just a roof over our heads, but something I no longer believed existed for me, a home and a community. The first time I told Pastor Marcos my whole story, he listened in silence. Then he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You went through the fire, but you weren't consumed because there was someone inside with you. Like the 3 young men in the furnace." It was in that little church that I found words for things I had only been able to feel before. There, other Christians shared testimonies of impossible deliverances, healings that defied logic, and divine interventions that changed destinies. For the first time, I wasn't an outlier. I was part of something bigger. 6 months after my escape, I received an unexpected call from Roberto Mendoza. His voice was deep, but there was a tone of satisfaction. "We thought you'd like to know. They dismantled another cell in Kuwait," he said. "They recovered documents, lists of past and present victims. Your name was there, marked with a symbol." I asked what the symbol was. He took a few seconds before answering. The translator said it means untouchable, or forbidden. After that night, Khalid gave orders that no one should ever mention his name again. He said you carried spiritual contamination. Those words hit me like a shock. It was confirmation, because I had never doubted what had happened. And it was also horror, because even powerful men, enveloped in violence and arrogance, trembled before that which they could not control. A short time later, Captain Amira contacted me again. They had found more survivors from the network. Among the photos she sent me, I recognized Layla, the young Jordanian woman who had advised me to just obey to survive. Seeing her frail, yet alive, awakened something new in me. "I want to help," Amira said. "What I've been through can't just be for me." And that's how I started working with the Freedom and Hope Foundation, an organization dedicated to providing legal, psychological, and spiritual support to survivors of human trafficking in the Middle East and North Africa. In the beginning, my role was simple: to sit with other women and share my story, to talk about nameless fears, about silences that hurt more than screams, about scars that no one sees. It was a space where we didn't need to explain anything, because we all understood everything. We are not just victims. we repeated in our meetings. We are witnesses, and witnesses have a responsibility to speak. Over time, my work grew. I began training airline employees to recognize signs of trafficking. Later, I was invited to testify before government commissions, explaining how these networks operated. I also started coaching police teams on how to approach victims without re-victimizing them, helping them recognize triggers and respect boundaries. With each step, I felt that God was taking my story, the one I once thought would only bring destruction, and transforming it into a tool of liberation for others. Each small victory, a network dismantled, a girl freed, a trafficker finally held accountable, felt like another step in my own healing. It was as if, with each life saved, a part of me was also restored. 2 years after my escape, I was invited to an international conference on human trafficking in Amman, Jordan. There, I met Captain Amira again. Now promoted, she commanded an entire regional unit specializing in transnational crimes. When we sat down for coffee after one of the lectures, she smiled in a tired but sincere way. "The affair that started with you changed my career," he confessed. "And it changed a lot of things inside me too." Then she pulled a battered notebook out of her bag. I recognized it before she even spoke. It belonged to Rashid, the warehouse supervisor. "We managed to do this on a later beat," he explained, "and I knew you needed to see this." She opened it to a page dated April 25th, just 2 days after my escape. There was a translation prepared by her. The leaders forbade any mention of the incident with the Egyptian woman. Named Prince Khalid ordered the entire facility closed and decreed that it should never be used again. Religious advisors claim that the place has been spiritually contaminated. Rashid says he saw something that night, something he can't describe. A non-human form appeared when she uttered that forbidden name. I wasn't there, but I saw the videos. I saw the reports. We shouldn't talk about it anymore. Some names have powers that we pretend don't exist. When I finished reading, the silence between us became so heavy, it felt like it had physical weight. "And Prince Khalid?" I finally asked. Amira let out a heavy sigh. "Officially, he remains a respected leader, but unofficially, everything has collapsed. His partners have distanced themselves. Projects have been canceled. Properties have been sold hastily. He spends his time circulating among religious leaders, as if seeking a purification that never comes." She hesitated before concluding. "Our sources say he developed a phobia, a specific one. He panics when someone mentions that name, the name you screamed that night." She didn't need to say which one. Today, 3 years after that dawn in Riyadh, the night a scream seemed to tear apart the separation between the natural and the supernatural, my life is completely different. The scar that looked like a barcode on my shoulder has disappeared without a trace, but the invisible marks remain. Not as pain, but as reminders. There are forces at work beyond any human explanation. I now work full-time with Freedom and Hope. We coordinate rescue, shelter, and rehabilitation operations in 6 different countries. Each survivor we encounter carries an entire universe of pain, and at the same time, an immense potential for rebirth. And every now and then, very rarely, I hear stories that echo something familiar. Tales of escapes that no one can explain. Escapes that defy logic. Coincidences so improbable they seem almost like whispers from heaven. Moments when absolute despair meets something greater. Something that doesn't fit into reports, statistics, or our human attempts to explain everything. Something only God can do. My relationship with faith has changed in ways I never imagined. I no longer follow the Islam I was raised in, but I also don't rigidly fit into any Christian denomination. What I have is something much more personal, a direct connection to that name I cried out in my darkest hour. That name which, in a way that doesn't fit into any theology, unleashed something greater than any human understanding. My family is still divided. My father never forgave me. My brother keeps in touch secretly, out of fear, but my mother is with me, and together, we managed to rebuild our lives. She also found faith in the same Coptic church that welcomed us, although she admits she doesn't understand everything that happened. "I only know that my daughter was lost in a place where I couldn't reach her," she once told me, "and someone more powerful than me brought her back." The statistics are cruel and merciless. According to the United Nations, more people live in slavery today than at any other time in history. In the Middle East, thousands of women are bought, sold, and discarded every year. Many will never regain their freedom. Some are rescued, others escape on their own. But, every now and then, Something happens that defies all logic, something that escapes what we can measure or predict. My story is not unique in its horror. Thousands of women have endured similar or worse forms of captivity. But what makes my testimony different is not the suffering. It is the reminder that, even in the darkest warehouses where human dignity is treated as a commodity, there exists a force that no trafficker can control, buy, or comprehend. I don't have perfect theological answers for what happened that night. Scientists might call it an acoustic anomaly or localized seismic activity. Psychologists might speak of extreme dissociation or altered perception due to trauma. Skeptics might classify it all as improbable coincidences. But I know the truth. Impossible is the only word that describes it. When I uttered that name, not as a magic formula, but as the cry of a soul that was almost lost, something responded. Something that shook not only the walls of my prison, but the entire structure of fear that my captors had built. The traffickers tried to measure me, to calculate the monetary value of my body. Prince Khalid thought he could possess me like any other acquisition. The guards believed they could break my will with pain and deprivation, but none of them counted on the power of that name. If you are listening to these words and find yourself in your own personal hell, if you feel that your captivity, whether literal or figurative, is impossible to break free from, I want you to know something. There are forces that act when everything else has failed. There are names that tremble on the lips of the oppressors, and there is hope, even when all doors seem locked. It's not magic. It's not a secret formula. The truth is much simpler and much deeper. There is a dimension to this universe that transcends any purely material explanation. Your desert may not resemble mine. It could be addiction, depression, abuse, illness, loss, debt, abandonment. Each person carries their own territory of pain, their own dark valley, but the same power that shook the walls of my captivity still manifests itself today in the deserts of those who cry out for it. And to you who work rescuing and rebuilding shattered lives, I leave a request. Never ignore the spiritual weight that exists in the healing process. When everything is taken from someone, identity, dignity, voice, even their own name, sometimes the only thing that remains is a fragile, yet real connection to the transcendent. This small spark is an anchor that no trafficker, no oppressor, no corrupt system can cut. My name is Amira Hassan. I am a survivor. I am a witness. And today, by the grace of God, I am also a warrior against an industry that profits billions by reducing people to numbers and labels. This is my story, etched in scars that everyone can see, and in others that only God knows. I'm not sharing it so that people will feel sorry for me. I share it to sow hope. Because even the most luxurious palaces hide basements of horror. Even in warehouses where human dignity is traded like a commodity, even in the darkest night, there is a light that darkness cannot extinguish. He who sustained me when I had no strength left can sustain you too. That name that made the walls of my prison tremble has the power to shake the prisons of your soul as well, whether they are visible or invisible. And if life has left you with no way out, if everything seems closed off, if no one listens to you, remember this. When all else fails, there is still one last appeal. A name that transcends walls, systems, principalities, and domains. A name the soul recognizes, even when the mind doubts. If this testimony touched your heart, please share it. Someone close to you desperately needs a sign that there is still hope, even when the night seems endless. Please indicate the country you are listening from. We want to see how far this message reaches. And if you also have a story of liberation, tell it. Each testimony is another flame lit against the darkness. Heavenly Father, in the name of Jesus, I now pray for every person who has heard these words. To those trapped in shadows, send your light. To those with broken hearts, pour out your healing. For those who have lost hope, remind them that the Lord is the God who sees, who hears, and who rescues. May the name of Jesus continue to tear down prisons, break chains, and set captives free. Amen. If this story touched you, please share it. Someone needs this light. And if you have a testimony, share it. Each voice adds another ray of hope in the fight against darkness.